long before cities, before roads, before written words or metal blades. There were only small groups of humans moving slowly across a cold and enormous world. The Ice Age stretched across the land with immense patience. Winds crossed open plains without interruption. Snow gathered in hollows between dark hills. Rivers froze at their edges beneath pale skies. In some places, towering walls of ice rested silently over the northern earth, unmoving except over centuries. And within that world, human beings walked carefully through the cold. They were not powerful creatures, not fast like the deer that crossed the valleys at dawn, not massive like the mammoths whose heavy footsteps shook the frozen ground, not protected by thick fur or long claws. Their survival depended on something quieter: observation, memory, patience, and eventually, tools. No one can know the exact moment when the first human truly understood that a stone could become something more than a stone. Archaeologists uncover fragments of sharpened rock buried beneath layers of ancient soil, but the thought itself, the realization, has vanished into deep time. Still, it is possible to imagine the conditions that slowly led toward that discovery. A cold evening, perhaps, a small group resting beside a weak fire at the edge of a rocky valley, smoke drifting upward into dark air, the smell of damp earth beneath melting snow. Somewhere far away, the low, distant sound of moving animals. Nearby lay broken stones scattered across the ground. Most were ordinary, heavy, rough, unnoticed. But one fragment may have caught the fading light differently, sharp along one edge, sharp enough to cut skin, sharp enough to scrape bark from wood or separate meat from bone. At first, the discovery may not have seemed important, merely useful for a brief moment before being discarded again into the landscape. But human beings remember useful things. That may have been the beginning. Not a sudden invention, not a dramatic transformation. Only a small observation carried quietly in the human mind. This stone cuts better than my hands. Over many generations, such observations accumulated slowly, like snow gathering across a winter field. The earliest humans already lived lives shaped by constant attention. They watched animal migrations. They remembered the locations of water during dry seasons. They noticed changes in weather and movement in the sky. Survival rewarded careful minds. Toolmaking likely emerged from this same deep habit of noticing. A broken rock beside a riverbank, a sharp fragment after stones struck together accidentally, a useful edge discovered while cracking bones. Again and again, humans encountered these moments, and gradually patterns formed. Certain stones broke in useful ways, others crumbled. Some created thin, sharp flakes, others shattered into useless pieces. Without written language, without formal teaching systems, knowledge still traveled through groups. One person watched another. Children observed older hands. Small successes repeated themselves across seasons. In this way, learning moved silently through generations. The Ice Age itself may have encouraged these discoveries. Cold climates demanded efficiency. Food was precious. Animal hides needed scraping and cleaning before they could become warm coverings. Bones contained rich marrow hidden beneath hard surfaces. Wood sometimes needed shaping into spears or digging tools. Bare hands alone were rarely enough. Simple tools extended human ability little by little. A sharp stone could cut more cleanly. A heavier rock could crack frozen bone. A pointed branch could reach where fingers could not. These small advantages mattered deeply in a harsh world, especially during winter. Imagine a frozen morning tens of thousands of years ago. The sky pale with weak sunlight, thin frost covering dry grasses, a slow wind moving through scattered pine trees. A small human group wakes inside the shelter of a cave, or beneath a rough covering of hide stretched over wooden frames. The fire from the night before has nearly died. Only faint heat remains beneath ash. People move carefully to preserve warmth. Outside, the world feels vast and indifferent, and already the day's survival has begun. Some gather wood, others search for tracks in snow. Someone carries a stone tool worn smooth from repeated use. The tool itself is simple by modern standards. Perhaps only a chipped hand-sized stone with one sharpened edge. Yet within it rest thousands of moments of observation and memory. Someone once discovered how to shape it. Someone taught another person. Someone improved the angle slightly. Someone learned which rocks fractured best. Human knowledge was growing, even then, slowly, patiently. The earliest stone tools discovered by archaeologists are astonishingly ancient. Some date back more than 2 million years, long before modern humans appeared. Other human ancestors, perhaps Homo habilis or Homo erectus, already understood that stones could be shaped intentionally. But during the Ice Age, tool-making became more refined, more specialized. Humans were adapting not only to animals and landscapes, but to cold itself. The freezing world demanded creativity. In many Ice Age regions, food sources changed with the seasons. Herd animals migrated enormous distances across open tundra. Plants became scarce during long winters. Rivers froze. Storms reshaped familiar paths. Tools helped humans respond to these constant changes. And unlike claws or teeth, tools could evolve quickly. A sharper edge, a longer spear, a smoother handle. Each improvement increased possibility. This ability to modify the environment rather than merely endure it became one of humanity's greatest strengths. Though at the time, those ancient people likely never thought of themselves as inventors. Their work was practical, immediate. A dull scraper made hide preparation slower. A weak spear could break during a hunt. Poorly shaped stone wasted valuable effort. Daily life itself became the teacher. Failure taught lessons harshly but clearly. And so humans experimented. Perhaps one person noticed that striking stone from a certain angle created thinner flakes. Perhaps another learned that heating some rocks near fire changed how they fractured. Perhaps children practiced shaping small stones while watching older members of the group work nearby. Around evening fires, sparks drifted upward into darkness while hands continued working. Stone against stone, tap, pause, turn, strike again. The sound of tool-making may have become deeply familiar across Ice Age camps, not loud, not hurried, only steady repetition. Over time, certain places may even have become known for good stone. Humans likely traveled intentionally toward riverbeds, cliffs, or exposed hillsides where strong flint or obsidian could be found. Archaeologists today discover evidence of ancient journeys made partly for this reason. Even in the distant past, humans understood materials. They recognized quality. Some stones produced razor-sharp edges, others remained durable after repeated use. This knowledge required memory extending beyond a single lifetime. And memory required community. No human survived the Ice Age alone for long. The world was too demanding. Cold nights could kill. Injury could isolate. Food shortages could weaken entire groups. Cooperation became as essential as fire itself. Within small bands of humans, knowledge moved between generations like warmth passed from one fire to another. An older hunter teaching a younger person how to grip a spear. A parent showing a child where to strike stone. Someone explaining through gesture and repetition which rocks were worth carrying. These scenes likely unfolded thousands upon thousands of times across prehistoric landscapes. Most were never preserved, yet traces remain. A chipped stone buried beneath sediment, a broken spear point near ancient animal bones, wear marks on tools shaped by countless hands, silent evidence of learning. And perhaps something else was growing too. Not only survival skills, but imagination. Because once humans realized that objects in nature could be reshaped intentionally, the world itself began to change in the human mind. A branch was no longer merely wood. It could become a spear. A stone was not only part of the ground. It could become a blade. Bone could become a needle. Hide could become shelter. The environment slowly transformed from something merely endured into something humans could carefully shape. This transformation did not happen quickly. For long stretches of time, progress may have been almost invisible from one generation to the next. But slowly, across centuries and millennia, small improvements accumulated. One better technique survived, another disappeared. The Ice Age continued around them through all of it. Snowstorms crossed valleys, glaciers crept over mountains, cold rivers carved through stone, and beside fires glowing softly in caves and temporary camps, human hands continued their patient work. There is something deeply moving about this early stage of tool-making, not because the tools themselves were complex. Most were remarkably simple, but because they reveal a certain kind of human mind already emerging. A mind capable of looking at the world and asking, can this become something useful? That question changed everything. It eventually led to axes, needles, boats, wheels, cities. But in the beginning, it may have started with only a fractured stone resting in cold human hands beside a fire on a winter night. A small discovery, easy to overlook, yet powerful enough to alter the future of an entire species. And still, the people of that distant age remained small beneath the immense skies of the Ice Age. At night, they slept near flickering firelight, while freezing winds moved across the dark plains beyond their shelters. Somewhere in the distance, mammoths crossed, snowy ground beneath pale stars. Ice cracked softly along river edges. Smoke drifted upward into endless darkness. The world remained enormous, but slowly, patiently, humans were learning how to shape tiny pieces of it, one stone at a time. The first discoveries were likely accidental. A stone dropped against another stone, a broken fragment catching light along a sharp edge, a cut made more easily than before. But accidents alone do not create traditions. Something else was required. Attention. Somewhere during the long ages of the Ice Age, humans began noticing that certain kinds of broken stone behaved in predictable ways. A careful strike could produce a cutting edge. A harder blow might split a rock into several useful flakes. Some stones broke cleanly, others resisted or shattered into rough fragments. And slowly, through repetition, observation became skill. The Ice Age world offered many kinds of stone. Dark flint hidden within chalky hills, quartzite smoothed by rivers, volcanic glass formed by ancient eruptions, dense rocks carried by glaciers over vast distances. Human groups moving across these landscapes likely learned where good stone could be found. Certain valleys may have become familiar gathering places. Riverbanks exposed fresh rock after floods and thawing seasons. Cliffs revealed seams of flint beneath weathered surfaces. The search for stone became part of survival itself. Not dramatic, not hurried, simply necessary. Imagine a cold afternoon beside a shallow river flowing between patches of snow and frozen grass. Thin clouds cover the sky. Water moves slowly beneath rims of ice. Several people kneel near the bank, turning stones over in their hands. Most are discarded immediately. Too brittle, too soft, too uneven. But occasionally someone pauses. A particular stone feels dense and smooth, heavy for its size, promising. It is carried back toward camp. There, beside the fire, experimentation begins again. One rock used as a hammer, another held carefully in the hand. Strike. A sharp crack breaks the evening silence. Fragments scatter across the ground. Perhaps nothing useful appears at first. Many attempts likely failed. Some cuts may have injured fingers. Good stone could split incorrectly. Carefully chosen rocks might break apart completely after a single mistake. Yet humans continued trying. Again and again. This patient repetition reveals something important about Ice Age people. They were persistent learners. Modern life often hides how much human knowledge depends on countless failed attempts. But prehistoric toolmaking was built almost entirely from trial and error. No manuals existed. No written instructions guided beginners. Only experience. A person watched another person work, then attempted the same movements. Slowly, the hands remembered. Archaeologists studying ancient tools often describe the earliest stoneworking methods as simple, but simplicity can be misleading. Even producing a basic sharp flake required understanding force, angle, and material without formal science. The body itself became the teacher. Hands learned through sensation. Eyes learned through tiny details in fractured stone. Ears learned the sound of a successful strike. The process demanded concentration. A poorly aimed blow wasted effort and valuable material. Too much force shattered the stone. Too little accomplished nothing. Certain angles produced thin edges. Others created thick, heavy fragments unsuitable for cutting. Over many generations, humans became increasingly skilled at controlling these outcomes. This gradual refinement can still be seen in ancient archaeological layers. Older tools often appear rough and thick. Later ones become thinner, sharper, more symmetrical. Skill accumulated slowly through time, and with greater skill came new possibilities. Sharp flakes could slice meat from bone more efficiently. Hide preparation became easier. Wooden shafts could be shaped more carefully. Spears became stronger and more reliable. Small improvements changed daily life in quiet but meaningful ways, especially during difficult seasons. Winter placed enormous pressure on Ice Age communities. Food could disappear beneath snow. Cold weakened the body. Animals migrated unpredictably. Injuries became more dangerous when temperatures dropped. Efficient tools conserved precious energy. A sharper cutting edge meant less time spent processing an animal carcass in freezing air. Better scrapers prepared hides more thoroughly, creating warmer clothing and coverings. Reliable spear points increased hunting success. Toolmaking was not separate from survival. It was survival. And yet these moments of craftsmanship may also have carried a kind of calm rhythm within them. Picture an evening camp sheltered beside rocky cliffs. The fire burns steadily now, stronger than before. Orange light flickers across cave walls darkened by smoke accumulated over many seasons. Outside, wind moves softly through frozen trees. Somewhere far away, wolves call into the night. Near the fire sits a person shaping stone. Careful hands rotate the rock slowly, studying its surface, searching for the next angle. Strike, pause, turn, strike again. Tiny flakes fall onto the ground beside worn animal hides. Others nearby may watch silently. Children perhaps observe from close beside older relatives, learning long before they ever shape tools themselves. No classroom existed. Knowledge lived in bodies and memory. Some archaeologists believe teaching became increasingly important during this stage of human development. Certain tool-making techniques grew too complex to rediscover easily through accident alone. Skill had to be demonstrated patiently. A learner needed guidance: where to hold the stone, how hard to strike, which fractures to follow. This kind of teaching may have strengthened human social bonds in profound ways. Cooperation was no longer limited to hunting or gathering food. Humans were now sharing techniques across generations. Ideas themselves became survival tools, and unlike physical objects, ideas could spread widely. One useful method discovered by a single group might slowly travel across entire regions over centuries through migration and contact between communities. Perhaps a traveler arrived carrying unfamiliar spear points, shaped differently from local tools. Others examined them carefully. Curiosity followed. New methods spread from hand to hand, camp to camp. The Ice Age world, though harsh, was not completely isolated. Human groups moved constantly, following animals, seeking shelter, searching for better land, escaping worsening cold. As they traveled, knowledge traveled too. Different environments also shaped different solutions. In forested regions, wood may have played a greater role in tool-making. On open tundra, long hunting spears became increasingly valuable. Near coasts and rivers, bone and antler tools offered unique advantages. Humans adapted creatively to local conditions, always learning from the materials around them. Stone, however, remained central for a very long time. There is something deeply intimate about these ancient tools. Even today, when archaeologists hold them carefully in gloved hands, the marks left by human decisions remain visible. A strike placed slightly off-center, an edge sharpened repeatedly, a grip smoothed by use. The object still carries traces of thought from someone who lived tens of thousands of years ago. Someone cold, tired perhaps, focused. Someone trying to solve practical problems with patience and memory. This connection across time feels strangely quiet, because the people who shaped those stones never imagined history would remember them. They were not building monuments or seeking recognition. Most likely they were simply trying to make tomorrow easier than today. A better scraper, a stronger spear, a cleaner cut. Human progress often begins this way, not through grand visions, but through small improvements repeated faithfully. The Ice Age itself continued without concern for these efforts. Storms crossed valleys with terrible force. Entire regions froze beneath advancing glaciers. Some years likely brought severe hunger. Others perhaps offered temporary abundance as herds passed nearby in great numbers. Humans adapted constantly to these shifting conditions, and tools became extensions of adaptation. By shaping stone, humans slowly expanded what their bodies alone could accomplish. Weak hands gained sharper edges. Limited reach extended through wooden shafts tipped with carefully crafted points. The relationship between humans and tools grew closer with every generation. Eventually, certain tools may even have carried emotional significance. A reliable spear used over many seasons. A carefully shaped scraper passed between family members. a favorite hammerstone worn smooth through repeated use. Objects that help preserve life often become meaningful. Even now, modern people grow attached to useful tools through familiarity and memory. It is not difficult to imagine similar feelings emerging long ago beside Ice Age fires. Perhaps someone mourned the loss of an especially valuable blade dropped into a river or shattered by accident. Perhaps skilled toolmakers earned quiet respect within their communities, not because they possessed wealth or status in a modern sense, but because their knowledge mattered deeply. A skilled craftsperson improved survival for everyone. This growing specialization may have changed social life slowly over time. Different people likely became known for different abilities. Some hunted skillfully, others tracked animals well. Some gathered plants efficiently, others shaped exceptional stone tools. Human communities became networks of shared strengths. Cooperation increased resilience. And through all of it, the sounds of stoneworking continued, sharp impacts echoing softly against cave walls, tiny fragments scattering across frozen ground, hands moving steadily in firelight. Outside the shelters, the Ice Age night stretched immense and cold beneath stars untouched by modern light. Frost gathered silently over sleeping valleys. Herd animals moved slowly through darkness beyond human sight. Yet within small pockets of warmth and smoke, human minds kept working, observing, remembering, experimenting. The distance between accident and mastery was long, longer than a single lifetime, but generation after generation continued adding small pieces of understanding. A better strike angle, a stronger handle, a sharper edge, and somewhere within this slow process, humans began changing not only tools, but themselves. The Ice Age was not one endless winter. There were warmer periods, changing seasons, years when grasslands opened wide beneath pale sunlight, but cold remained a constant presence across much of the world. Ice covered enormous northern regions. Glaciers crept slowly through valleys over thousands of years. Bitter winds crossed open plains with little resistance. Long winters tested every living thing that moved across the land. For human beings, survival required continuous adjustment. Nothing could be wasted. Not food, not warmth, not effort. And because survival was never guaranteed, tools became more important with each passing generation. At first glance, the Ice Age world may appear empty in the imagination. Vast snowfields beneath grey skies, silent forests coated in frost, frozen rivers winding through distant hills. Yet it was alive with movement. Reindeer travelled in great herds across tundra grasslands. Woolly mammoths crossed open plains searching for vegetation beneath snow. Bison gathered near sheltered valleys. Wolves followed migration routes patiently through the cold. Humans moved among them carefully, always watching. The relationship between people and animals during this period was deeply connected to survival. Large animals provided food, hides, bones, sinew, and fat. Every part of a successful hunt could become valuable. But hunting large animals was dangerous and uncertain. Human bodies alone were fragile. Without tools, approaching massive Ice Age animals at close range would have been almost impossible. Thick hides resisted bare hands. Distance favored powerful creatures with horns, tusks, or speed. Tools helped close that distance. Slowly, humans developed sharper spear points and stronger shafts. Wooden spears hardened in fire may have appeared long before more advanced stone-tipped weapons. Eventually, carefully shaped points allowed deeper penetration and more effective hunting. But improvement came gradually, one problem at a time. Imagine a hunting group moving quietly through frozen grass early in the morning. Their breath clouds the cold air. Snow crunches softly beneath layered hides wrapped around their feet. The wind shifts constantly across the plain, carrying scent toward distant animals. Each person carries tools shaped through many hours of labor, simple perhaps, but essential. A spear balanced carefully in the hand, a stone blade tied securely with sinew, a scraper hanging from a belt of hide. These objects represented preparation against uncertainty. A failed hunt could mean hunger for many days, and so humans observed everything. Animal tracks pressed into soft snow, broken branches near frozen streams, the direction of migrating herds. Tool-making itself became shaped by these harsh realities. Hunters needed points that would not shatter easily. Scrapers needed edges durable enough to prepare thick winter hides. Cutting tools had to remain useful during long journeys through difficult terrain. The environment constantly tested human solutions, and the environment was unforgiving. Cold changes the body, fingers stiffen, breathing becomes sharper, movement slows beneath heavy coverings. Even small tasks become more difficult during freezing weather. A poorly prepared shelter could allow dangerous heat loss during the night. Wet clothing might freeze before morning. Food spoiled differently in cold climates, but finding it became far more difficult during winter scarcity. Humans responded through adaptation rather than strength. This may be one of the most remarkable features of Ice Age humanity. Instead of evolving thick fur or larger bodies like many northern animals, humans relied increasingly on learned behavior. Knowledge became protection. A sharpened scraper helped turn animal hide into warmer clothing. Stone awls pierced holes for stitching. Cutting tools separated tendons and sinew used for binding materials together. Every improvement supported survival in quiet ways. A warmer covering meant less energy lost to cold. A better spear increased hunting success. A sharper blade reduced wasted time during food preparation. The connection between tools and daily life grew deeper with every generation. And because Ice Age conditions varied across regions, humans faced many different challenges. Some groups lived near forests where wood remained available even during colder seasons. Others crossed open steppe landscapes where trees were rare and wind moved endlessly across exposed ground. Near rivers and coastlines, fishing tools likely emerged slowly over time. In colder inland regions, hunting equipment became increasingly specialized. Adaptation was never complete. Conditions changed constantly. Glaciers expanded and retreated over immense periods. Animal migration patterns shifted. Entire landscapes transformed as temperatures rose or fell. Humans responded not by remaining still, but by remaining flexible. Mobility became another survival tool. Small groups traveled carefully across familiar territories, carrying knowledge with them. Where water could still be found in winter, where stone for tools existed, where animals passed during migration seasons, where caves or sheltered valleys offered protection from storms. The Ice Age world demanded memory, and memory demanded communication. Around evening fires, information was likely shared constantly, not formal instruction in the modern sense. More practical, a gesture toward distant hills, a repeated demonstration, a warning about dangerous ice, a reminder about where stone fractured best. These conversations help preserve survival itself. one generation teaching another. In many ways, the development of tools may have strengthened human language and cooperation together. Complex tasks often require explanation. Teaching someone how to shape a spear point or prepare hides likely encouraged more detailed communication over time. Human minds and tools evolved alongside each other, slowly intertwining. Picture a shelter at dusk. The fire burns low and steady. Smoke drifts upward through gaps in hide covering stretched over bent wooden frames. Outside, snow falls softly across dark ground. Wind brushes against the edges of the camp. Inside, several people work quietly. One repairs a spear, binding with sinew softened between careful fingers. Another scrapes a hide stretched tightly across wood. A child watches an older relative chip stone beside the fire. No movement is wasted. Daily life required constant labor simply to remain alive. Yet within that labor existed routine, and within routine perhaps even comfort. The scrape of stone against hide, the crackle of firewood, the familiar weight of tools handled countless times. These rhythms repeated across seasons and generations. Archaeologists studying Ice Age sites often find evidence of repeated occupation. Certain caves or valleys became known places where humans returned again and again over long periods. This suggests not only survival, but familiarity. People remembered landscapes, specific shelters, reliable hunting grounds, stone sources, protected campsites. The world slowly became mapped inside the human mind through repeated movement and shared memory, and tools helped extend human control within that world. Not complete control. Never that. Storms still arrived suddenly. Illness still spread. Harsh winters still brought hunger and death. The Ice Age remained larger and more powerful than any human group, but tools created small islands of advantage, enough to endure. There is something deeply humbling about this period of human history. Progress was painfully slow by modern standards. A useful innovation might spread across regions over centuries rather than years. Entire lifetimes passed with only minor changes in technique. And yet, humans continued improving, not because the process was easy, but because survival rewarded persistence. A slightly stronger spear mattered. A better scraper mattered. A warmer shelter mattered. Tiny improvements accumulated quietly across generations until human life itself slowly transformed. Perhaps this is why prehistoric toolmaking feels so emotionally powerful even now. It reveals humanity at its most fundamental level. Not seeking luxury, not seeking fame, only trying to reduce suffering little by little through observation and effort. A sharp edge replacing blunt force, a sewn hide replacing exposed skin, a stronger spear replacing dangerous proximity. These were acts of adaptation, and beneath them all rested an important realization. The environment could be shaped, not completely, not permanently, but enough to create moments of safety within a difficult world. The Ice Age nights remained cold beyond the firelight. Darkness stretched endlessly across plains where animals moved unseen through drifting snow. Ice cracked along riverbanks beneath pale moonlight. Wind crossed frozen valleys with low, endless sounds. Inside small shelters, humans rested beside tools laid carefully nearby. Stone blades, scrapers, hammerstones, wooden shafts drying near the warmth. Objects shaped patiently by human hands. And as sleep slowly came to those ancient camps, perhaps no one fully understood what these tools truly represented. Not only survival, but the beginning of humanity's long relationship with invention itself. Not all landscapes offered the same gifts. Some regions held dark seams of flint beneath rolling hills. Others offered smooth river stones shaped by centuries of flowing water. Far to the north, glaciers dragged broken rock across enormous distances, scattering useful stone across open plains. Humans learned these places carefully. The Ice Age world was harsh, but it was not empty. It provided materials for those patient enough to understand where to look. And so, over many generations, people became quiet observers of the land itself. They learned where stone fractured cleanly, where trees grew strongest, where animal bones remained dense and useful after long winters. The search for materials became woven into everyday life. Imagine dawn spreading slowly across a frozen valley. The sky carries a pale silver color just before sunrise. Thin ice covers shallow pools between grasses bent by frost. A few dark birds move overhead against the distant clouds. Several people walk beside a riverbank, not hunting, not fleeing danger, searching. Their eyes move constantly across the ground. Occasionally, someone bends to lift a stone, weighing it briefly in cold hands before setting it aside again. Most rocks are unsuitable. Some crumble too easily. Others resist controlled breaking. Some contain hidden fractures that ruin sharp edges before work even begins. Good stone required experience to recognize. Archaeologists believe certain Ice Age groups traveled long distances to obtain high-quality material. Flint, obsidian, chert, and quartzite were valuable not because they were beautiful, but because they behaved predictably when shaped. A reliable stone saved time and effort mattered enormously during the Ice Age. Carrying heavy material across difficult terrain demanded energy. Every object transported by migrating groups had to justify its weight. This likely encouraged careful decision-making about tools and raw materials. People learned efficiency slowly. Some stones were carried unfinished and shaped later near campfires. Others were worked immediately at gathering sites to reduce weight before transport. Tiny decisions like these shaped survival, and survival shaped culture. Near certain cliffs or exposed hillsides, humans may have returned season after season to gather familiar stone. Archaeologists today sometimes discover ancient quarry sites where countless fragments remain scattered across the earth. Silent evidence of repeated visits over thousands of years. Places of memory. Places where knowledge accumulated. A child visiting such a location with older relatives might slowly learn which rocks deserved attention and which could be ignored. Knowledge moved through observation long before written language existed, hands teaching hands. Yet stone was only one part of the material world humans explored. The Ice Age offered bone in abundance wherever large animals were hunted successfully. Mammoths, bison, reindeer, horses, and many other creatures provided not only food, but structure. Bones were strong, lightweight, durable, and importantly, they could be shaped. At first, perhaps humans used broken bones simply because they were available. A sharp splinter from a fractured leg bone might scrape or pierce effectively. But over time, people likely began recognizing the unique qualities of bone as a crafting material. Unlike stone, bone could bend slightly before breaking. It could be carved more gradually, smoothed, sharpened. This opened new possibilities. Needles, awls, fishhooks, fine points. The relationship between humans and hunted animals became increasingly complex. Animals provided survival in many forms at once. Food for the body, hide for warmth, bone for tools, sinew for binding. Very little could be wasted. Imagine an evening after a successful hunt. The air smells faintly of smoke and fresh snow. Firelight flickers across scattered tools laid carefully on the ground. Nearby rest the remains of a large animal brought back to camp through great effort. The work has only begun. Some people cut meat into strips for drying or cooking. Others scrape hides clean before freezing temperatures stiffen them. Nearby, bones are cracked carefully with hammerstones. Not carelessly, purposefully. Certain bones contain marrow rich with calories needed during winter. Others may later become raw material for tools. Large pieces are set aside rather than discarded. Nothing disappears quickly in the Ice Age. Everything useful lingers. Bone crafting likely required different rhythms than stone shaping. Instead of sharp cracking impacts, the work may have involved slower scraping, grinding and carving. Hours spent refining points or smoothing surfaces beside the fire. Patience became part of craftsmanship, and perhaps this patience shaped human thought itself. When a task requires steady attention over long periods, the mind changes. It becomes more observant, more capable of planning, more aware of sequence and consequence. Ice Age toolmaking was not only altering objects, it was training human intelligence through repetition. Wood, too, held enormous importance, though far less survives in the archaeological record because organic material decays over time. Yet wooden tools were almost certainly everywhere in prehistoric life. Spears, digging sticks, handles, frames for shelters, firewood, drying racks, wood surrounded daily existence. Different trees offered different qualities. Some bent easily, others remained hard and straight. Humans likely learned these differences intimately through generations of use. In forested regions, this knowledge would have been especially valuable. A straight young sapling could become a spear shaft. Flexible branches could support hide shelters. Dry wood burned hotter and cleaner. Every landscape taught lessons. Picture a small group moving through a sparse Ice Age forest. Snow clings to pine branches overhead. Their footsteps press quietly into layers of old needles beneath frost. One person pauses beside a fallen tree, examining the grain where the trunk has split naturally. Hands run along the wood slowly, testing strength, flexibility, weight. Eventually, part of the branch is cut and carried away, not because it already is a tool, but because it might become one. This ability to imagine transformation was becoming increasingly important in human life. Stone could become a blade. Bone could become a needle. Wood could become a spear. The natural world was no longer only encountered passively. Humans were learning to reshape materials intentionally according to future needs. And this required foresight. A spear made today might not be used until weeks later. Hide prepared carefully before winter could preserve warmth for months. Stone gathered during migration might support survival far from its original source. Planning extended beyond the present moment. That shift may seem small, but it changed humanity profoundly. Archaeologists often describe Ice Age humans as behaviorally sophisticated, meaning they possessed complex planning abilities, social cooperation, symbolic thought, and adaptive learning. Toolmaking played a central role in this transformation, because every crafted object carried evidence of thought extending through time. Selection, preparation, shaping, use, repair. These stages demanded memory and anticipation. The process was slow, very slow. Even experienced toolmakers likely spent many hours producing reliable equipment. A carefully shaped spear point or polished bone tool represented labor accumulated patiently through repeated motion. Strike, scrape, grind, smooth, bind. The sounds of crafting must have filled many prehistoric camps, not loud or hurried, only steady, and often accompanied by silence. Long pauses while someone studied a piece of stone before the next strike. Moments of concentration while adjusting bindings on a spear shaft. Quiet observation while children watched older hands repeat familiar movements. The Ice Age nights outside remained immense and cold, but inside the glow of human shelters, another kind of world was slowly forming. A world shaped not only by weather and instinct, but by intention. One of the most remarkable aspects of prehistoric craftsmanship is how deeply connected it remained to the environment. Humans did not create materials from nothing. Everything began within the landscape itself. Stone from rivers, bone from hunted animals, wood from forests, sinew from muscle and tendon, adhesives from tree resin or heated substances. Humans worked with what the world provided, and because resources varied from place to place, tool traditions varied too. Some groups specialized in long, thin blades. Others created heavier scraping tools. Cold northern regions encouraged different survival techniques than wooded southern valleys. The Ice Age was not one single human experience. It was many local worlds, connected by movement and learning. Yet across all these regions, one truth remained constant. Human survival depended increasingly on skill, not merely strength, not merely luck. Skill learned slowly across generations. As darkness settled over ancient camps each evening, tools rested beside sleeping humans like quiet companions. Stone edges reflecting firelight. Bone needles tucked safely into hide pouches. Wooden spear shafts leaning near cave walls. Simple objects, but within them rested patience, memory, and the growing ability of humans to shape the world around them with careful hands. By now, tool-making had become part of daily rhythm, not a rare event, not an accidental discovery, a routine, as familiar as gathering firewood, as necessary as watching the weather. Across the Ice Age world, small human groups continued refining the objects that helped them survive. Their tools remained simple compared to those of later civilizations, yet each generation added tiny improvements through observation and repetition. A sharper edge here, a stronger binding there, a better balance in the hand. Progress moved slowly enough to feel almost invisible within a single lifetime. But over thousands of years, human craftsmanship deepened, and nowhere was this patience more visible than in the making of hunting weapons and hand tools. The Ice Age demanded reliability. A weak spear could break at the worst moment. A dull scraper wasted precious energy. Poorly shaped blades damaged hides instead of preserving them. Tools had to function in cold, difficult conditions where mistakes carried real consequences. And so, people worked carefully. Imagine an afternoon inside a sheltered cave while snow drifts steadily outside. The entrance glows faintly with pale winter light. Smoke rises slowly toward darkened stone ceilings stained by many seasons of fire. Near the warmth sits a craftsperson shaping a spear point from flint. The stone rests against a pad of hide on one knee. A hammerstone strikes with controlled force. Tap, pause, turn, tap again. Tiny flakes fall softly beside scattered bone fragments and worn tools from earlier work. Nearby, another person smooths a wooden shaft with a scraper, removing rough fibers little by little. No one rushes. The work rewards patience more than speed. Archaeologists studying Ice Age tools often speak of reduction sequences, meaning the step-by-step process through which raw material slowly became a finished object. Even a simple spear point required planning. First, the stone had to be selected, then broken into workable pieces, then carefully shaped, edges refined, thickness controlled. One careless strike could ruin hours of effort. This demanded remarkable concentration, and concentration became part of prehistoric life. Modern people often imagine early humans as constantly moving through dramatic survival scenes, but much of life during the Ice Age was probably quieter than that. Long stretches of ordinary labor, repair work, preparation, observation. People sat beside fires shaping tools while wind moved across dark valleys outside. Children watched and learned. Older tools were repaired rather than discarded immediately. Materials were reused whenever possible. Human life revolved around maintenance. Spears especially required ongoing care. Wood could warp in moisture or cold. Stone points loosened from repeated impact. Bindings frayed through use. Sinew taken from animal tendons became valuable for fastening points securely to wooden shafts. When dried and wrapped tightly, sinew created surprisingly strong connections. Some groups may also have used natural adhesives from tree resin or heated substances to strengthen bindings further. These methods reveal increasing sophistication, not sudden brilliance, but cumulative learning. Someone discovered that heated resin hardened differently. Someone noticed that certain bindings held better in wet weather. Someone experimented with spear balance. Knowledge expanded through countless small observations preserved across generations. And because hunting remained essential, spear making grew increasingly important. Picture a hunting camp preparing for migration season. The air smells of smoke and scraped hide. Animal bones lie stacked beside stoneworking areas. Several people work together near the edge of the firelight. One sharpens points, another straightens spear shafts using gentle heat. Someone tests bindings by pulling firmly against the wood. The atmosphere is focused but calm. There is no urgency yet. Preparation comes before necessity. This ability to prepare in advance marked an important development in human survival. Instead of reacting only to immediate danger, humans increasingly anticipated future needs. Winter would come. Animals would migrate. Tools would wear down. Planning reduced risk. And planning depended on memory. The same careful attention-shaped hand tools used for daily survival. Scrapers became especially important during the Ice Age because hides provided critical protection against cold. Preparing a hide properly was slow, repetitive work. First, flesh and fat needed removal. Then the surface had to be cleaned and softened. Sometimes stretching, drying, or smoking followed. Without good tools, the process became far more difficult. Stone scrapers varied in size and shape depending on their purpose. Some were broad and thick for heavy work, others thinner and sharper for finer preparation. Over time, repeated use polished certain edges smooth. Archaeologists can still see these wear patterns today beneath microscopes. Tiny traces left by ancient labor. Imagine hands gripping a scraper hour after hour beside a fire while winter storms move beyond the shelter. The hide stretches tightly across wooden supports. Each pull of the tool removes small layers slowly. Smoke drifts through the air carrying the scent of burning wood and animal fat. Outside temperatures fall further as darkness spreads. Inside the work continues, steady, repetitive, necessary. There is something profoundly human in these scenes. Not conquest, not glory, only persistence. The Ice Age rewarded those who could continue working carefully despite fatigue, cold, or uncertainty. Survival depended less on moments of heroism than on thousands of ordinary tasks completed patiently. Sharpening tools, repairing bindings, preparing hides, maintaining fire, and through repetition, skill deepened. Some individuals likely became highly respected for their craftsmanship. An experienced toolmaker could produce stronger weapons, sharper blades, and more reliable scrapers than others. Their knowledge increased survival for the group as a whole. Yet expertise remained fragile. It existed only in memory and demonstration. If knowledge was not passed onward, it vanished. This made teaching essential. Children growing up in Ice Age communities probably learned tool-making gradually through observation long before attempting it themselves. They watched older hands strike stone. They gathered discarded flakes and experimented nearby. Over time, muscle memory formed slowly. Human learning is deeply social. Even today, many skills are difficult to explain fully through words alone. Watching matters. Repetition matters. Shared space matters. Ice Age craftsmanship depended on these same principles. Perhaps a young learner ruined many stones before producing a useful edge. Perhaps frustration appeared sometimes around the fire. But eventually the hands learned where to strike, how much force to use, when to stop. Skill entered the body itself. Meanwhile, tools continued changing human behavior in subtle ways. Better weapons allowed hunters to keep greater distance from dangerous animals. More efficient scrapers improved clothing quality. Sharper blades reduced labor time during food preparation. Tiny advantages accumulated quietly. And because tools preserved energy, humans could invest effort elsewhere, traveling farther, experimenting more, surviving longer winters. In this way, technology and survival became deeply connected long before agriculture or cities existed. The Ice Age environment continued shaping every decision. In open tundra regions, long-distance hunting tools became increasingly valuable. In forested areas, different spear lengths or cutting tools may have worked better among trees and uneven terrain. Humans adapted locally. There was no single universal solution. Some groups crafted delicate blades. Others favored durable, heavy tools. Regional traditions slowly emerged over generations as knowledge settled into familiar patterns. Archaeologists today can sometimes identify ancient cultural groups partly through differences in tool styles and crafting methods. Even tens of thousands of years ago, humans were already developing traditions, ways of doing things remembered within communities, certain shapes, preferred materials, specific techniques. Culture itself was beginning to form around repeated human behavior, and all of it unfolded beneath the enormous skies of the Ice Age. Night after night, stars spread over frozen valleys untouched by artificial light. Wind moved through grasses stiff with frost. Herds crossed distant plains beneath moonlit snow. Inside small shelters, firelight flickered across patient hands still shaping the world in tiny ways. A spear point refined edge by edge. A scraper smoothed through use. A wooden shaft balanced carefully for throwing. Simple objects, yet each carried evidence of thought reaching beyond the present moment. Humans were no longer surviving only through instinct. They were learning how to prepare, how to improve, how to teach, and slowly, through endless repetition beside winter fires, Human hands became tools of remarkable precision themselves. Knowledge is fragile when it lives only in memory. A sharpened stone can survive buried beneath earth for tens of thousands of years. Bone tools may rest inside caves long after the hands that shaped them have disappeared. But skill itself vanishes quickly unless it is shared. And during the Ice Age, sharing knowledge became one of humanity's greatest strengths. No single person could discover everything alone. Not how to track migrating herds across changing seasons. Not how to shape reliable tools from difficult stone. Not how to survive harsh winters year after year. Human survival depended increasingly on cooperation, and cooperation depended on teaching. Picture an evening camp beneath a rocky overhang. Outside, snow moves softly through cold air beneath a sky already darkening toward night. Wind brushes against the entrance, carrying faint sounds from distant animals moving somewhere across the valley. Inside, warmth gathers around the fire. Smoke curls upward along stone walls stained black by many winters. Animal hides hang drying near the heat. Stone fragments scatter across the ground beside partially finished tools. Several people sit close together. One shapes a scraper slowly with practiced hands. Another repairs bindings on a spear shaft. Nearby, a child watches carefully. Nothing formal is happening, no lesson announced aloud, and yet teaching fills the shelter. The child notices where the toolmaker strikes the stone, how the hands rotate it after each impact, how mistakes are avoided through patience instead of force. Learning begins through watching. Long before written language, human beings learned by sharing attention. A glance, a repeated motion, a correction made gently through demonstration. Ice Age communities likely relied on these quiet exchanges constantly. Archaeologists studying prehistoric societies often emphasize how difficult many tool-making techniques would have been to rediscover independently. Skill required guidance. Without teaching, complex methods could disappear within only a few generations. This made older members of a group deeply valuable, not merely because they possessed strength or hunting ability, but because they remembered where good stone could be found, how hides were prepared before deep winter, which spear designs worked best, when animals migrated through certain valleys. Memory itself became a survival resource, and around countless fires across the Ice Age world, those memories passed slowly into younger minds. The process likely required enormous patience. Children learning toolmaking may have spent years observing before producing reliable tools of their own. Early attempts probably broke often. Edges formed incorrectly. Spears became unbalanced or fragile. Failure was part of learning. But failure carried less danger within cooperative groups, where knowledge could be corrected and improved collectively. This may be one reason human beings became so successful despite physical weakness compared to many animals. Information accumulated socially. One person's discovery became shared survival. Imagine a young learner attempting to shape flint for the first time. The firelight flickers across nervous hands. Nearby sits an older craftsperson whose tools show the polish of long experience. The younger person strikes too hard. The stone shatters badly. Fragments scatter across the ground. For a moment, silence. Then perhaps the older toolmaker demonstrates again. Not angry, not dramatic, only patient. The correct angle, the controlled motion, the careful pause before striking. Tap, turn, tap again. Learning continues. These moments may appear small, Yet they shaped human history profoundly, because every successful act of teaching allowed knowledge to survive beyond a single lifetime. And over thousands of years, knowledge accumulated. Stone working methods improved. Hunting strategies spread. Shelter designs adapted to different climates. Fire became easier to maintain and transport. Human culture deepened through repetition and memory. The Ice Age environment made this especially important because conditions remained unpredictable. Seasons changed harshly. Animal movements varied. Storms could isolate groups for long periods. Communities that shared information effectively likely survived more often than those that did not. Cooperation increased resilience, and cooperation required trust. Within small Ice Age bands, people depended on one another constantly. A skilled hunter still relied on others to help process meat and hides. Toolmakers needed hunters for bone and sinew. Parents needed communities to help protect children during migrations and harsh weather. Life was interconnected. No one survived entirely alone. Even gathering materials for tools may have involved cooperation. Some stone sources existed far from seasonal camps. Carrying heavy raw materials across difficult terrain became easier with shared labor. During hunts, coordinated spear use increased success against large animals. Human groups moved almost like living networks of shared ability. One person remembered migration routes. Another excelled at shaping blades. Someone else understood plants or weather patterns. Together, survival became more possible. The fire itself likely served as the center of much of this learning, not only because it provided warmth and light, but because it gathered people together, night after night. Outside the shelters, darkness spread across frozen landscapes where temperatures fell sharply after sunset. Wind crossed open ground carrying snow through valleys and over rivers edged with ice. Near the fire, however, humans could remain awake longer, talking, working, watching. The extra hours created by firelight may have transformed social life deeply. Instead of collapsing immediately into darkness after sunset, people now shared extended evenings together. Stories may have emerged here. Demonstrations, memory, instruction. A child hearing repeated accounts of dangerous hunts or distant travel routes learned important lessons indirectly. Watching experienced hands repair tools beside the flames taught practical knowledge without formal explanation. Human intelligence developed within these shared spaces. Archaeologists sometimes refer to this as cumulative culture, the ability of humans to build gradually upon previous generations instead of beginning from nothing each time. A sharpened stone technique learned by one group might spread slowly outward. A better binding method could persist for centuries. Useful habits became traditions. Unlike instinct, traditions can change rapidly. This gave humans extraordinary flexibility, and flexibility mattered greatly during the Ice Age. Different regions demanded different solutions. Forested valleys required different tools than open tundra plains. Coastal groups likely experimented with fishing technologies, while inland hunters refined spear points for large migrating animals. Knowledge adapted locally, yet the process remained deeply human everywhere. Observe, practice, teach, repeat, again and again across generations. Picture a winter storm surrounding a small shelter somewhere in prehistoric Europe or Asia. Snow gathers heavily outside. Wind presses against hide coverings stretched over wooden frames. The fire burns steadily in the center, while shadows move softly across the walls. Inside, several people sit close together. Someone scrapes a hide carefully. Someone sharpens bone points. A child sleeps wrapped in fur near the warmth. Nearby, another learner watches older hands shaping stone. The sounds are familiar now. Soft impacts, crackling wood, low voices, breathing. A world of patience. There is something comforting about imagining these ancient moments. Not because life was easy, it certainly was not, but because even in such difficult conditions, humans created spaces of teaching and care. Knowledge survived because people chose to share it, not perfectly, not without loss, but enough. Enough for tools to improve. Enough for survival strategies to spread. Enough for future generations to inherit more understanding than those before them. This inheritance became one of humanity's most powerful tools of all. Long before books, before schools, before written history, human beings were already building invisible libraries inside one another's minds. And around Ice Age fires glowing against the darkness, those libraries continued growing quietly through the endless winter nights. By now, tools were woven into nearly every part of human life, not separate from survival, part of it. Stone blades rested beside sleeping places. Scrapers lay near drying hides. Wooden spears leaned against cave walls darkened by smoke. And at the center of much of this daily rhythm burned the fire. The Ice Age world beyond its glow remained cold and unpredictable. Frost gathered over grasslands before sunset. Wind crossed valleys carrying snow through bare trees. Rivers hardened slowly beneath growing sheets of ice. But inside the circle of warmth, humans shaped a different environment, a temporary refuge against the cold. Fire changed everything quietly. Not only warmth, not only protection from darkness, it extended time itself. Without fire, Ice Age nights would have ended most activity quickly. Darkness and freezing temperatures forced rest. But with steady flames came extra hours for work, teaching, repair, cooking, and thought. Evening became useful. Picture a small shelter deep into winter. Outside, snow drifts across frozen ground beneath pale moonlight. The wind rises and falls softly against the entrance. Somewhere far away, animals move unseen through darkness. Inside, the fire burns low but steady. Orange light flickers across stretched hides hanging from wooden frames. Smoke curls upward through cracks overhead. Stone tools rest beside scattered fragments of bone and wood. Several people remain awake. One tends the fire carefully, feeding it dry branches gathered earlier before sunset. Another uses a scraper to soften an animal hide slowly across the knee. Nearby, someone sharpens a bone point beside the warmth. The atmosphere is calm, repetitive, almost hypnotic, and much of Ice Age survival may have felt this way. Not dramatic, only continuous. Humans work constantly to maintain the fragile balance between warmth and cold, hunger and safety. Tools helped manage this balance little by little, especially when preparing hides. Animal hides were among the most valuable resources available during the Ice Age. Thick fur protected humans from freezing temperatures during migration and winter storms. Hides formed blankets, coverings, shelter walls, carrying bags and clothing. But fresh hides did not become useful automatically. They required careful labor. First came cleaning. Stone scrapers removed flesh and fat still attached to the inner surface. This prevented decay and made further preparation easier. The work could take many hours depending on the size of the animal and the condition of the hide. Then stretching, sometimes drying, sometimes smoking over low fires, sometimes softening repeatedly through pulling and scraping. The process demanded patience more than strength. Hands moved steadily through familiar motions learned across generations. Scrape, pull, stretch, turn, again and again. Archaeologists studying ancient hide processing tools often find smooth, polished wear along scraper edges caused by repeated contact with skin and leather. Tiny traces remain long after the people themselves disappeared, silent evidence of ordinary labor. Yet this ordinary labor mattered enormously. A properly prepared hide could preserve warmth through dangerous winters. Poor preparation meant stiffness, cracking, or moisture retention that increased risk during freezing weather. Human comfort and survival depended on craftsmanship. The Ice Age rewarded attention to detail. Even cooking changed through tools and fire. Earlier humans likely consumed much raw food long before controlled fire became widespread. But eventually, cooking transformed nutrition and daily life profoundly. Meat softened. Certain plants became easier to digest. Food lasted longer near smoke and heat. Cooking also created social routines. Meals gathered people together beside firelight after long days of movement or labor. Bones cracked open for marrow. Meat sliced carefully with sharpened stone. Fat rendered slowly near the flames. The smell of smoke and cooked food must have become deeply familiar within Ice Age camps. Comforting, perhaps, a sign of temporary safety. Imagine the sounds of such a camp at night. The crackle of burning wood, low conversation, stone scraping against hide, occasional sparks drifting upward. Outside the shelter, darkness stretches endlessly across frozen valleys. But inside, life continues within warmth and light. There is something deeply human in these scenes. People working together not toward greatness or conquest, but toward another surviving morning. Tools shaped nearly every task. Stone blades cut meat into smaller pieces for drying or cooking. Bone awls pierced hides for stitching. Wooden handles improved grip and leverage during repetitive work. Even small refinements reduced suffering. A sharper edge saved effort. A smoother scraper reduced hand strain. A stronger needle stitched more reliable coverings. The relationship between humans and their tools grew intimate through constant use. Some objects may have remained with individuals for long periods, repaired repeatedly rather than discarded. Familiar tools fit the hand differently over time. Grip marks formed. Edges wore unevenly according to use. A favorite scraper, a reliable knife, a carefully balanced spear. Simple possessions perhaps carried quiet emotional importance. And because life during the Ice Age required mobility, many tools needed to travel easily. Human groups moved seasonally across landscapes, following animals, avoiding worsening weather, or searching for resources. This movement shaped daily routines. Shelters had to be assembled and disassembled. Useful objects carried carefully. Fire maintained through journeys whenever possible. Nothing permanent existed, only repeated adaptation. Picture dawn before migration. The fire has burned low overnight. Thin smoke rises into pale early light, filtering through hide coverings. Frost clings to the edges of tools left near the shelter entrance. People wake slowly. Some prepare remaining food. Others pack tools into hide bundles. Someone checks spear bindings carefully before travel. Outside, tracks from passing animals cross fresh snow nearby. The world keeps moving, and so must the humans within it. Tools made movement possible. Without effective cutting implements, shelter construction became harder. Without reliable weapons, unfamiliar regions became more dangerous. Without prepared hides, cold exposure increased during long journeys. Technology and migration remained connected constantly. The Ice Age itself was changing too. Over thousands of years, climates shifted gradually. Some regions grew colder. Others warmed slightly before freezing again. Forests expanded and retreated. Animal populations changed with the environment. Humans responded not through physical evolution alone, but through behavior, new tools, new techniques, new survival routines. Adaptation accelerated through learning, and learning happened daily through ordinary life. A child watching hide preparation beside the fire. Someone experimenting with drying meat differently. A craftsperson adjusting scraper shapes for better grip. Tiny innovations emerge quietly from repetition. Most were probably forgotten. Some survived. This slow filtering of useful ideas shaped human history long before written records existed. There is a peacefulness hidden within this rhythm of survival. Not ease, not comfort by modern standards, but familiarity. Humans woke each morning knowing certain tasks awaited them. Fires needed tending. Hides required scraping. Tools needed repair. Wood had to be gathered before darkness returned. The repetition created structure within an uncertain world, and perhaps structure itself became comforting. Especially during long winters when storms isolated small groups for days at a time. Inside shelters, people worked close together beneath flickering firelight while wind carried snow across the frozen earth outside. Hands remained busy almost constantly, sharpening, stitching, binding, scraping, cooking. Life moved slowly around the fire. And through these repeated acts of maintenance and care, humans transformed survival from mere endurance into something more stable. Not secure, never fully secure, but increasingly organized, increasingly intentional. The tools resting beside those ancient fires represented far more than objects. They embodied memory, cooperation, experimentation, and the growing human ability to create small pockets of warmth and order within a cold and difficult world. Outside, the Ice Age night remained vast, beyond imagination. But inside the shelter, beside the steady breathing of sleeping companions and the soft glow of embers, human hands continued shaping the future quietly, one careful task at a time. The world of the Ice Age was never still. Glaciers advanced slowly across mountains and valleys. Rivers changed direction over centuries. Grasslands opened where forests once stood, then vanished again beneath colder winds. Herd animals followed ancient migration paths, stretching across enormous distances, and humans moved with them. Movement became part of survival. Small groups traveled through landscapes that could feel endless. Open tundra beneath pale skies, frozen river valleys, sparse forests where snow settled quietly between dark trunks. Every journey demanded preparation, memory, and reliable tools. Without tools, migration would have been nearly impossible. A long spear could mean food far from familiar camps. A scraper could preserve warmth through prepared hides. A sharp blade could repair shelter materials during storms. Human adaptability traveled in the hand. Imagine a group crossing an exposed plain late in autumn. Cold air presses against layered animal skins, wrapped tightly around shoulders and legs. Frost hardens the ground beneath careful footsteps. In the distance, large herds move slowly across pale grass touched by early snow. The humans follow at a distance, not hurried, not reckless, patient. Each person carries only what matters most. tools wrapped carefully in hide bundles, fire-starting materials protected from moisture, wooden shafts balanced across shoulders, bone needles stored safely in small pouches. Everything carried has purpose, because migration during the Ice Age required constant judgment about weight, usefulness, and survival. The land itself taught these lessons. In some regions, stone suitable for toolmaking was difficult to find. Human groups entering unfamiliar territory may have transported high-quality material over long distances. Archaeologists sometimes discover stone tools made from rock originating hundreds of kilometers away, evidence of either migration, trade, or long chains of contact between groups. Even in deep prehistory, humans were connected through movement. Ideas traveled alongside people. A new spear point design discovered in one region might slowly spread across distant landscapes over generations. Different groups adapted tools according to local environments, creating regional styles shaped by weather, animals, and available materials. No single ice age existed. There were many. Cold coastal worlds filled with sea winds and frozen shorelines. Open mammoth steppes stretching across Eurasia. Mountain valleys shadowed by advancing glaciers. Wooded southern refuges where temperatures remain milder. Humans adapted differently within each environment. In colder northern areas, hunting large migrating animals became increasingly important. Spears grew longer and more refined. Clothing preparation demanded efficient hide processing tools. Portable shelters may have become more sophisticated for groups constantly moving through exposed terrain. Further south, forested regions encouraged different strategies. Woodworking tools mattered more. Smaller game animals changed hunting methods. Dense vegetation shaped movement patterns. The environment influenced technology continuously. Picture an evening camp somewhere near the edge of a vast glacial plain. The sky glows faintly after sunset, reflecting pale light from distant ice. Wind moves steadily across open ground, carrying fine snow along the surface. Nearby stands a temporary shelter built from wood, hide, and perhaps mammoth bone gathered from earlier hunts. Inside, people work beside the fire. One person repairs footwear stitched from softened hide. Another sharpens thin stone blades unlike those used farther south. A hunter examines damaged spear points collected during recent travel. These regional differences mattered. Human groups learned not only from the land, but from one another. Occasional meetings between communities may have allowed techniques to spread across enormous areas over time. Archaeologists studying prehistoric tool traditions often notice surprising similarities between distant sites, suggesting contact networks far older than once imagined. Perhaps travelers exchanged knowledge near seasonal gathering places. Perhaps younger people joined neighboring groups through family connections. Perhaps hunters carried useful innovations across migration routes. The exact details remain uncertain, but evidence suggests humans were rarely isolated completely. Knowledge moved gradually through the Ice Age world, like embers carried carefully between fires, and migration encouraged creativity. New environments forced experimentation. A tool effective on open plains might fail inside dense forests. Hunting unfamiliar animals required different strategies. Cold coastal winds demanded better shelter construction. Scarcity pushed humans toward adaptation rather than routine. This flexibility became one of humanity's defining strengths. Not physical dominance, behavioral adaptability. humans could observe a new environment and slowly reshape their survival methods to fit it. That ability changed everything. Imagine arriving in unfamiliar land after many weeks of travel. The rivers flow differently here. The stone fractures in unfamiliar ways. The animals leave tracks never seen before. At first, uncertainty fills daily life. Old habits become less reliable. And so, experimentation begins again. Testing local stone, studying animal behavior, adjusting spear length or blade shape. Human beings became specialists in learning from changing conditions. This learning was rarely dramatic. Mostly, it happened through small repeated observations. A certain wood bends better in wet climates. One stone edge dulls too quickly during cold weather. A different spear balance improves throwing distance across open tundra. Tiny lessons accumulated, and through accumulation, human survival expanded into environments once impossible to inhabit. Fire remained essential throughout these migrations. Cold landscapes punished carelessness severely. Travelers needed ways to preserve warmth during movement between camps. Carrying embers or maintaining fire-starting knowledge became deeply important. Some archaeologists believe humans transported slow-burning materials specifically to preserve fire during journeys. Others suggest repeated fire-making techniques improved gradually through practice and experimentation. Either way, fire traveled with humanity, a moving center of warmth through immense frozen landscapes. Picture a temporary camp after many days of migration. Snow begins falling lightly outside newly assembled shelters. Tired travelers unpack familiar tools near the fire. Someone hangs wet hides to dry beside the warmth. Another reshapes damaged spear tips gathered during the journey. Despite unfamiliar surroundings, certain routines remain unchanged. The scrape of stone, the crackle of firewood, the stitching of hide, the sharing of food. These repeated actions created continuity even while landscapes shifted around them. And perhaps continuity itself became emotionally important. The Ice Age world could feel enormous and uncertain. Storms erased tracks quickly. Seasons transformed familiar terrain. Entire valleys changed beneath advancing ice over generations. Yet human practices endured. Teaching, tool-making, fire tending, cooperation. Portable traditions carried through memory. There is something deeply moving about imagining these migrations across prehistoric Earth. Humans were physically small within vast environments, shaped by climate and time far beyond individual control. And still, they kept moving. Not because they conquered nature, but because they learned from it patiently. Each new region became another teacher. Stone taught through fracture. Wood taught through flexibility. Weather taught through consequence. And slowly, through thousands of journeys, humans developed an extraordinary ability to survive almost anywhere. By the later stages of the Ice Age, different human communities across the world possessed remarkably varied tool traditions. Fine blades, needles, spear throwers, fishing implements, carving tools, all emerging gradually from generations of experimentation. None appeared suddenly. Every innovation rested atop older knowledge, a sharper edge built upon earlier stonework, a stitched garment built upon generations of hide preparation, a complex hunting tool built upon centuries of observation. Human creativity expanded quietly through repetition. Outside the shelters, glaciers still towered across northern lands beneath pale stars. Wind continued crossing frozen plains exactly as it had long before humans arrived. But now, moving carefully beneath those enormous skies, traveled a species carrying tools, memory, and the growing ability to adapt the world around them through patience and learning. At first, tools changed only survival. A sharper stone cut more effectively. A stronger spear improved hunting. A scraper softened hides against winter cold. The improvements were practical, immediate. But over very long stretches of time, something deeper was happening quietly beneath these daily acts of survival. Tools were changing the human mind itself. Not suddenly. Not in a way anyone living then could have noticed. The transformation unfolded slowly across thousands of generations beside campfires, migration trails, riverbanks, and frozen valleys, because every tool required thought before it existed. A spear point began as imagination. A scraper began as planning. A needle began as the recognition that bone could become something delicate and useful. Humans were no longer responding only to the world directly around them. They were beginning to picture possibilities. Imagine a person sitting beside a fire late at night, after others have fallen asleep. The embers glow softly inside the shelter. Outside, wind moves through darkness beyond the entrance. Snow drifts quietly against the edges of stretched hides. In their hands rests a partially finished tool. The work pauses. The craftsperson studies the object carefully, perhaps considering how it might function better. A sharper angle, a smoother grip, a different shape. This moment matters because the mind is no longer focused only on what exists. It is thinking about what could exist. That ability would eventually reshape human history completely. But during the Ice Age, it emerged slowly through ordinary labor. Stoneworking especially demanded increasingly complex thinking. To shape a reliable blade or spear point, a person had to imagine the final form before it appeared. Each strike influenced future strikes. Mistakes could not always be reversed. This required sequencing, planning, prediction, control. The human brain became deeply practiced in these skills. Archaeologists sometimes describe advanced prehistoric tool-making as evidence of abstract thought, the ability to mentally organize steps toward a future goal rather than reacting only to immediate circumstances. A stone was no longer simply a rock. It became potential. That shift may seem subtle, yet it changed the relationship between humans and the environment profoundly. The world became filled with hidden possibilities waiting to be shaped. Wood could become shelter. Bone could become art or tools. Fire could transform food and warmth. Stone could become cutting edges sharper than teeth. Humans increasingly viewed the environment not only as something endured, but as something worked with. And this changed social life too. As tools grew more specialized, cooperation became more important. Different people carried different forms of knowledge. Some understood hunting routes deeply. Others excelled at hide preparation or stone shaping. Communities became systems of shared intelligence. No single person needed to know everything, but the group remembered collectively. Picture a winter evening inside a crowded shelter. Children sleep beneath layered hides near the warmth of the fire. Older members of the group sit nearby repairing tools after many days of travel. Someone sharpens a blade carefully, while another stitches torn clothing with a bone needle. Conversations move softly through the shelter. Stories, perhaps. Warnings. Memories of earlier migrations. Knowledge circulates continuously. This exchange of information strengthens memory beyond the individual mind. human survival no longer depended only on instinct passed biologically across generations. It depended on culture. Learned behavior preserved socially, and culture can evolve far more quickly than the body. A useful tool design discovered by one generation could spread outward within centuries rather than waiting for physical evolution over immense timescales. This flexibility gave humans remarkable adaptive power during the constantly shifting climates of the Ice Age. Cold periods intensified. Warmer intervals returned briefly. Animal migrations shifted unpredictably. Humans adjusted through learning, again and again. There is something quietly beautiful about this process, not because it was easy, but because it reveals human intelligence developing through patience rather than domination. The Ice Age did not surrender easily. Storms still killed. Hunger still returned. Cold still pressed constantly against fragile shelters. Yet humans kept experimenting. A slightly better spear throw. A stronger binding technique. A finer needle for stitching. Tiny improvements accumulated across generations until human life itself slowly transformed. And alongside practical knowledge, something else may have been growing too. Reflection. The long evenings created by firelight gave humans time beyond immediate survival tasks. Sitting together through winter darkness, people likely observed one another closely. Relationships deepened, memories accumulated, shared experiences formed identity within groups. Some archaeologists believe symbolic thought expanded significantly during later Ice Age periods. Cave paintings, carved objects, ornaments, and burial practices suggest increasingly rich inner lives. The same minds shaping tools were also shaping meaning. Perhaps a carefully crafted spear carried pride. Perhaps certain objects held memory connected to specific people or hunts. Perhaps stories emerged explaining landscapes, animals, or seasons. The exact thoughts of Ice Age humans remain unknowable, but their tools reveal minds capable of patience, planning, and imagination. And imagination changes everything. Imagine a young learner watching an experienced craftsperson shape stone. At first, the child sees only movement. Strike, turn, strike again. But eventually the learner begins understanding intention behind the motions. The hands are guiding the stone toward a form that exists first inside the mind. This ability to mentally model outcomes became one of humanity's defining strengths. Long before cities or machines, humans were already practicing future thinking beside ancient fires. What will this tool become? How will it help tomorrow? What happens if I shape it differently? Questions like these slowly expanded cognitive possibility. The Ice Age environment itself encouraged such thinking because survival demanded preparation. A delayed response often meant failure. Clothing needed preparation before winter arrived, weapons before migration season, shelters before storms. Humans learned to think ahead, and thinking ahead changed human society fundamentally. Cooperation deepened because long-term survival required trust. Shared planning mattered more. Food storage, travel timing, and tool production increasingly depended on coordination within groups. Social bonds became survival tools too. Picture a migration camp preparing for departure. The fire burns low in pale morning light. Frost coats the edges of tools laid neatly beside packed hide bundles. People move through familiar routines, checking spear points, securing stitched clothing, gathering children close before travel. Everyone understands the process, not because instructions are written anywhere, but because the knowledge lives collectively within the group. This collective memory may be among humanity's greatest inventions, more powerful than any single tool. Because tools can break, stone can shatter, wood can rot, but shared knowledge survives through teaching, generation after generation. And through that survival, humans became increasingly capable of adapting to difficult environments without waiting for slow biological change. The Ice Age shaped this process deeply. Cold landscapes demanded creativity. Migration demanded flexibility. Uncertainty rewarded intelligence and cooperation. The result was not perfection. Humans remained vulnerable, small, dependent on weather and animals and luck, but they also became remarkably inventive. And perhaps the most extraordinary part is how ordinary much of it felt at the time. Most prehistoric people were not trying to transform the future. They were simply trying to improve daily life slightly. A warmer covering, a stronger spear, a sharper blade. Yet these quiet acts of improvement slowly transformed the species itself. Outside their shelters, glaciers continued advancing and retreating beneath silent stars. Rivers froze and thawed. Herds crossed endless plains exactly as they had for countless generations. But beside the firelight, human beings were becoming something new. Not separate from nature, still deeply part of it, yet increasingly capable of imagining possibilities beyond immediate survival. And in those patient hands shaping stone through the long cold of the Ice Age, the distant beginnings of human civilization were already quietly taking form. The Ice Age lasted far longer than any human lifetime. Glaciers moved slowly across continents, while generations were born, lived, and disappeared beneath the same cold skies. Rivers froze and thawed endlessly. Herds crossed familiar migration routes through valleys shaped by wind and ice. And throughout those immense stretches of time, human beings continued working with their hands. Patiently, a stone lifted from frozen ground, a spear sharpened beside a fire, a hide scraped smooth through long winter evenings. Simple acts repeated so many times they became part of the rhythm of human existence itself. By now, the tools resting inside Ice Age shelters had become more than survival objects. They were memory made physical. Every blade carried knowledge learned across generations. Every stitched hide reflected accumulated patience. Every spear point revealed countless earlier attempts, failures, and improvements quietly preserved through teaching. Human beings had learned not only to survive the frozen world, but to shape small parts of it carefully. Imagine one final evening somewhere near the end of the Great Ice Age. The air outside is cold, but calmer than before. Snow rests lightly across distant hills beneath a sky full of stars, untouched by modern light. A frozen river glows faintly beneath the moon. Inside a shelter, near the edge of a valley, a fire burns low. Its warmth spreads softly across sleeping figures wrapped in animal hides. Tools rest nearby where they were last used. Scrapers polish smooth from years of handling. Spear shafts leaning quietly against stone walls. Bone needles tucked safely into worn hide pouches. Someone remains awake beside the fading embers. Hands moving slowly, repairing, sharpening, preparing for another day. There is no sense yet that humanity stands at the beginning of an enormous future. No awareness of cities to come. No knowledge of ships, writing, metal, or machines. Only the next winter, the next journey, the next hunt. And perhaps that is what makes these early humans feel so deeply familiar even now. Their world was different beyond imagination. yet their efforts were profoundly human. They worried about warmth, food, children, safety, memory. They solved problems slowly through observation and cooperation. They learned from mistakes. They taught what they knew to younger hands sitting nearby in the firelight. And through these quiet acts, humanity changed. Not quickly. The transformation unfolded with extraordinary slowness. Thousands of years passed while stoneworking techniques improved little by little. Generations lived entire lives beneath frozen skies without witnessing dramatic change. But small improvements continued accumulating. A sharper cutting edge here, a better sewing technique there, a stronger spear balance, a more efficient scraper. Tiny acts of invention repeated across enormous spans of time eventually reshaped human destiny. There is something calming about this pace. Modern life often feels rushed, loud, and impatient. Progress appears measured in days or months, but Ice Age humans lived within a different rhythm entirely. One tied to seasons, migration patterns, weather, and memory. Learning unfolded slowly, and perhaps because it unfolded slowly, it settled deeply into human culture. Toolmaking was never only about objects, it was about attention, a careful strike against stone, a patient adjustment to a binding, a thoughtful choice of wood before shaping a spear. These actions required focus on the present moment, hands and mind working together. The Ice Age may have shaped this quality within humanity. The ability to remain attentive through repetition, to continue refining small tasks, even when results appeared gradual or uncertain. That patience became one of humanity's greatest strengths. Not physical power, not speed. Patience. The willingness to try again after failure. To observe carefully. To remember useful lessons. To pass knowledge onward. Picture countless forgotten evenings spread across prehistoric time. Firelight flickering against cave walls. Snow falling softly outside temporary shelters. Children drifting toward sleep while older hands continue shaping tools nearby. Tap, turn, scrape, bind. The sounds repeat endlessly across generations. And within those repeated motions, human culture slowly deepens. Somewhere during these long ages, people may also have begun sensing connection between themselves and the tools they created. A well-made spear might inspire trust during dangerous hunts. A carefully sewn garment could preserve warmth through brutal winters. Useful objects became companions in survival. Even now, modern people feel attachment to familiar tools worn smooth through years of use. The feeling is ancient, because tools extend human ability outward into the world. A blade sharpens the hand. A spear lengthens reach. A needle transforms hide into shelter and clothing. Through tools, humans slowly learned they could alter the environment instead of merely enduring it. Not completely. Never completely. The Ice Age remained powerful until its gradual ending. Storms still crossed frozen landscapes without concern for human plans. Animals migrated according to ancient instincts. Glaciers shaped mountains over timescales beyond comprehension. Yet within that immense natural world, humans carved out small spaces of warmth, skill, and intention. And those small spaces mattered. Archaeologists today uncover traces of this long human journey buried beneath layers of earth and stone. A flint blade beside ancient ash, a worn scraper abandoned near an old campsite, a bone needle resting silently inside a cave untouched for thousands of years. The objects remain quiet, but they speak of effort, of minds learning patiently across generations, of hands refusing to stop adapting. The people who made those tools are gone now beyond all memory. Their names disappeared long before written language existed. Their voices faded into the wind crossing ancient valleys. And still, something of them survives, not only in bones or artifacts, but in human behavior itself. Modern humans still learn through teaching, still solve problems through experimentation, still shape materials into useful forms, still gather together during difficult times seeking warmth, safety, and cooperation. The ancient rhythms continue beneath modern life. A person sharpening a kitchen knife, repairing torn fabric, teaching a child how to use tools carefully. These ordinary moments stretch backward across unimaginable time toward those Ice Age fires where human craftsmanship first deepened into tradition. And perhaps this is the quiet legacy of the earliest toolmakers. Not conquest, not domination, but continuity. A long, unbroken chain of learning passed from hand to hand through the cold darkness of prehistory until it eventually reached the modern world. Outside, the final Ice Age winds continue moving softly across distant frozen plains, beneath stars older than humanity itself. Snow drifts gently along riverbanks where mammoths once traveled through pale winter light. Inside the shelter, the fire settles lower now. The last tool of the evening rests beside the embers. Hands finally become still. And somewhere within the deep silence of the ancient world, humanity sleeps beside the quiet creations that slowly helped shape its future.